The whole town council chamber went silent when the state investigator placed the red door key on the table. Not a folder, not a photo, not a dramatic speech. Just one small brass key with red paint still stuck inside the grooves. Mayor Calvin Briggs stared at it. His face did not change at first. That was the strange part. He kept the same polite smile he had worn all evening while telling everyone I was confused, unstable, and desperate for attention. Then the investigator slid a second item beside the key, a cassette tape. Old, cracked, labeled in black marker. For the girl who buys the house. Calvin's smile finally disappeared. His attorney leaned toward him. His wife lowered her head. The council members stopped whispering. And I sat in the front row with dust still under my fingernails from the basement of a house everyone said was worthless. 3 months earlier, I had bought that house for $100. Not 100,000, 100. People laughed when they heard it. My brother laughed the loudest. My former boss called it a death trap. My aunt said poverty had made me reckless. And the mayor himself smiled at me on the courthouse steps and said, "Some houses are cheap because nobody sensible wants them." He was right about one thing. Nobody sensible wanted 19 Briar Lane. The roof sagged over the back porch. The windows were boarded. The front yard looked like it had been trying to swallow the sidewalk for years. The basement smelled like wet stone and old secrets. But I bought it anyway. I bought it because I was 35 years old, broke, divorced, and tired of sleeping in my sister's laundry room while everyone explained my life to me. I bought it because it was the only thing in the world with my name on the deed. I bought it because I had spent 10 years restoring other people's homes and watching men with cleaner shoes take credit for my work. And I bought it because when I stood in that ruined hallway for the first time, I felt something I had not felt in years, a warning, not fear, not exactly, more like recognition, as if the house knew what it was to be abandoned, as if it had been waiting for someone people underestimated. Then, on the 14th day of renovation, I found the red door. It was not in a normal place. It was behind a false wall in the basement, sealed with old plaster and covered with shelving. The door was narrow, steel painted a dark, ugly red, not cheerful red, not barn red, blood red. And bolted to the center of it was a brass plate with one sentence scratched into the metal. "Do not open unless they come back." I stood there with my flashlight in one hand and a pry bar in the other. My heart was beating so hard I could hear it over the dripping pipe behind me. Then my phone rang, unknown number. I almost ignored it. But something made me answer. A man's voice came through, low and rough, like he had not used it much that day. "You found it," he said. I froze. "Who is this?" He breathed once. Then he said, "Don't open the red door." Before I could speak, the line went dead. That was the moment I should have left. That was the moment any sensible person would have walked upstairs, locked the house, called the police, and never gone back alone. But there is something people do not understand about being pushed to the edge of your life. Fear changes shape. When you still have something to lose, fear tells you to hide. When everything has already been taken, fear starts sounding like a dare. So I stood there in the basement of a $100 house, staring at a red door a stranger knew I had found, and I whispered to nobody, "Then why did someone build it?" My name is Tessa Rowan. Before all this happened, I was the woman people called dependable, not brilliant, not special, dependable. I showed up early. I stayed late. I fixed things with my hands and kept receipts in labeled envelopes. For 10 years, I worked as a renovation coordinator for Pike and Alder Homes, a regional restoration company that made old houses look expensive for people who never had to sand their own floors. I knew old plaster. I knew wiring. I knew which walls carried weight and which ones only pretended to. That last part mattered more than I realized because people are built like houses. Some carry the real weight quietly. Some just stand in the middle of the room looking important. My boss, Martin Pike, was the second kind. He wore tailored jackets and spoke softly to wealthy clients. He called me our miracle worker in front of them. Then he paid me like an assistant and told me I was lucky to be included. For years, I accepted that. My husband, Joel, said I was too loyal. Then he left me for a woman who sold kitchen fixtures and told everyone our marriage had become emotionally underdeveloped. That was his phrase, emotionally underdeveloped. Like our marriage was a basement he had decided not to finish. After the divorce, I moved into my sister Lena's house. She said it would be temporary. Then she started leaving apartment listings on my pillow, not cruelly, Not exactly. Just in that family way where help slowly becomes humiliation. Her husband, Brian, never said much to me directly, but I heard him one night through the wall. She's 35, Lena. At some point, people have to stop rescuing themselves with other people's towels. I moved out the next week. Not into an apartment. I could not afford one. I moved into my van behind the storage unit where I kept my tools. That lasted 16 days. Then I saw the auction notice, 19 Briar Lane. Mem bid, $100, tax delinquent. Structural distress, estate unresolved, property sold as is. No inspection warranty, no municipal repair credit. I stared at the listing for a long time. The house had belonged to a woman named Evelyn Marr. That name meant nothing to me then. It would mean everything later. The auction took place on a rainy Thursday morning at the county office. Only 9 people showed up. 6 were investors. 2 were men from Briggs Development, and 1 was me, sitting in the back row with wet hair and a folded check for $100 in my jacket pocket. When the auction officer read the address, no one raised a hand. I did. A man in a gray coat turned and looked at me. He had silver hair and a face smooth enough to look harmless from across a room. Mayor Calvin Briggs. He was not supposed to be bidding himself. He was just watching. That should have told me something. Opening bid, $100, the officer said. My hand stayed up, no one else moved. Sold. Just like that, I owned a house. The mayor approached me afterward. He was taller up close. His smile was neat, practiced. Miss Rowan, is it? Yes. I admire optimism, he said. I looked at the damp deed packet in my hand. Do you? He laughed softly. Briar Lane has been a problem property for years. You may find it costs more to save than it's worth. Most things worth saving do. His smile thinned. Careful with that kind of thinking. It can get expensive. Then he walked away. One of the Briggs Development men watched me from beside the elevator. Not angry. Curious. That was worse. I drove straight to the house. The rain had stopped, but the trees still dripped over the sidewalk. 19 Briar Lane sat at the end of a dead-end street, near the old rail line. The neighborhood had once been beautiful, small brick homes, wide porches, mammal trees. Now half the houses were empty. 2 had demolition notices. 1 had a blue tarp over the roof, and mine looked like a person holding their breath. The front door stuck when I pushed it open. The air inside smelled stale. Dust, mold, old wood. But beneath it, something else. Cedar, faint clean out of place. I walked room by room with my flashlight. Front parlor, dining room, kitchen with peeling yellow paint, 2 bedrooms upstairs, a bathroom with clawfoot tub and cracked tile. Basement stairs that groaned like they were warning me. The house was bad, but not hopeless. The roof needed patching, not full replacement. The foundation had cracks, but not fatal ones. Most investors would see trash. I saw work. Work I understood. Work I could control. That first week I cleaned. I dragged out moldy curtains, broken chairs, stacks of newspapers, and bags of clothes no one had wanted enough to claim. I found an old Bible with pressed flowers inside, a child's shoe behind a radiator, a box of Christmas ornaments in the attic. Nothing valuable, nothing strange. Just the ordinary sadness of a life that had ended without enough people to carry it away. On the 6th day, my brother-in-law Brian drove by. He did not come inside. He stood at the curb with his arms crossed. Lena sat in the passenger seat, pretending not to look worried. You bought this? He asked. Yes, for money, $100. He laughed. Even the county couldn't give it away. I wiped plaster dust from my cheek. Then I got a bargain. Tessa, Lena said gently, maybe you should talk to someone before putting more energy into this. Someone like who? She looked away. Brian answered for her. Someone who can help you make realistic decisions. Realistic, that word had followed me all year. Be realistic about your career. Be realistic about your divorce. Be realistic about housing. Be realistic about dreams. People love telling you to be realistic when their version of reality keeps you beneath them. I looked back at the house. The front porch leaned slightly to the left. A crow sat on the chimney like it owned the place. I'm staying, I said. Brian shook his head. Suit yourself. They drove away. I kept working. By the 2nd week, I had running water in the kitchen and 1 functioning outlet in the front room. I slept on an air mattress with 3 blankets and a hammer within reach. At night, the house settled around me. Old beams creaked, pipes clicked. Wind moved through gaps in the window frames. But every morning, the place looked a little less dead. That mattered. I repaired the porch steps. Scraped paint from the dining room trim. pulled ruined carpet from the upstairs hall. Then I started on the basement. The basement was colder than the rest of the house. Stone walls, low ceiling, a rusted boiler, shelves along the back wall, built from thick boards and nailed too neatly to be random. The shelves bothered me, not because they were old. Everything was old. They bothered me because they were too clean. The rest of the basement was dusty, cluttered, neglected. But the area around those shelves looked different, protected. I told myself I was imagining it. Then I smelled cedar again, stronger there. On the 14th day, I pulled the shelves away. Behind them was plaster, not original stone, not drywall. Plaster in a basement. That made no sense. I tapped it with the handle of my screwdriver, solid, then hollow, then solid again. My skin prickled. I chipped at one corner. The plaster came away in large flakes. Behind it was plywood. Behind the plywood was steel, red steel. I stepped back. The flashlight beam shook in my hand. The door was narrow, almost hidden by the framing. Someone had built a wall around it, then disguised that wall, then put shelves in front of it. Not to decorate, to bury. The brass plate was at eye level. Do not open unless they come back. I read it twice. Then my phone rang. Oh, new number. I answered. You found it, the stranger said. I could hear wind on his end. Maybe traffic. Maybe breathing. Who are you? Listen carefully. Don't open the red door. My mouth went dry. How do you know about this? You need to leave the house. Who are you? If they know you found it, they will come. Who? A pause. Then he said, the people who made Evelyn Marr disappear. The line clicked. Gone. I stood very still. Evelyn Marr, the woman who had owned the house. The woman the county said had died in 2020, except the stranger had not said died. He said disappear. I went upstairs slowly. I locked the front door, then the back. Then I sat at the kitchen table with my phone, my deed packet, and my heart pounding in my throat. The smart thing would have been calling the police. But I had worked with enough county inspectors, developers, and permit offices to know something important. Small towns do not keep secrets because nobody knows. They keep secrets because too many people know just enough to stay quiet. So I did not call the police first. I researched. Evelyn Marr was listed in county records as deceased. No obituary, no funeral notice, no surviving family. Her property had gone into tax delinquency after confirmed death. Confirmed by whom? The file did not say. I searched old newspapers. Evelyn had been a records clerk at the county assessor's office for 28 years. She retired in 2018. In 2019, she attended 3 council meetings and spoke against the Briar Lane redevelopment plan. In one article, she was quoted saying, "People should ask why perfectly good houses are being condemned only after Briggs Development buys the lots around them." That sentence made me sit back. Briggs Development, Mayor Calvin Briggs. The man who watched the auction, the man who told me the house was not worth saving. I kept searching. The redevelopment plan was called Briar Commons Mixed-Use Housing. Coffee shops, retail space, luxury townhomes. A clean little dream drawn over an old neighborhood like the people who lived there had never existed. Briggs Development owned 7 parcels on Briar Lane. They needed 3 more. One of them was mine. One had belonged to Evelyn Marr. I found one blurry photo from a council meeting. Evelyn sat in the 3rd row wearing a blue cardigan, white hair pinned back, glasses hanging from a chain around her neck. She looked ordinary. That made the red door more terrifying. Ordinary people do not build secret doors unless extraordinary people force them to. At 11:38 that night, someone knocked on my front door. 3 knocks, slow, measured. I froze at the kitchen table. The porch light did not work. Through the curtain, I saw a shape, male, tall, still. I held my breath. Another knock, then a voice. "Miss Rowan, it's Mayor Briggs." My stomach dropped. I did not answer. "I saw your van outside. I know it's late. I just wanted to check on you." Check on me at almost midnight, at a house he told me not to buy. I picked up my hammer. He knocked once more. "You'll find people here are neighborly if you let them be." I stayed silent. After a long moment, his footsteps moved down the porch. A car door opened, closed, an engine started. I waited 10 minutes before breathing normally again. Then I knew 2 things. The stranger was right, and I was not alone in the story anymore. The next morning, I drove to the county library, not the sheriff, not the courthouse. The libraries are the closest thing ordinary people have to intelligence agencies. A librarian named Mrs. Keene helped me find local archives. She was in her 70s, sharp-eyed, and wore a sweater with tiny embroidered birds. When I asked for articles about Evelyn Marr, her hand paused over the keyboard. Evelyn, she said softly. You knew her? Everyone knew Evelyn. How did she die? Mrs. Keene looked toward the front desk, then back at me. Officially, that word hit hard. Yes, she fell. They said she had a stroke first, found her at the bottom of her basement stairs. And unofficially, Mrs. Keene studied me. Why are you asking? I bought her house. Something changed in her face, not fear exactly. Recognition, she lowered her voice. Then be careful. Why? Because Evelyn was careful too. And it did not save her. I wanted to ask more. But a man in a county maintenance jacket walked between the shelves. Mrs. Keene closed the archive window. Come back tomorrow at noon, she said. Not before, not after. Then louder she added, the tax maps are on the second floor, dear. I left with my palms sweating. That afternoon, I bought 4 security cameras, 2 new locks, and a prepaid phone. I also bought a small red notebook. On the first page, I wrote the date, then everything, the auction, the mayor's warning, the red door, the stranger's call, the midnight visit. Mrs. Keene's words. I wrote because memory becomes fragile when fear gets loud. Paper does not panic. The next day at noon, I returned to the library. Mrs. Keene led me to a back room used for genealogy records. She closed the door, then she handed me a manila envelope. Evelyn gave me this 2 months before she died, she said. She told me if anything happened to her, and someone decent bought the house, I'd know what to do. My throat tightened. How would you know if I was decent? Mrs. Keene smiled sadly. I watched you carry trash out of that house for 2 weeks before you carried anything in. Inside the envelope was a photograph, Evelyn Marr standing on her porch beside a younger man with kind eyes and a thick black beard. On the back, someone had written, Samuel Ortiz. Find him if the door opens. There was also a phone number. I stared at it, the stranger. You know him? I asked. Mrs. Keene nodded. He was Evelyn's neighbor. His mother owned the yellow house next door. Briggs Development got it condemned after she refused to sell. What happened to him? He left town after his mother died. Why did he call me? Because I called him after you asked about Evelyn yesterday. My eyes lifted. You told him? I told him the house had finally been bought by someone who looked like she might listen. I thought of the red door. Do you know what's behind it? Mrs. Keene's face tightened. No, but Evelyn said if that door ever opened, the town would learn what it had been standing on. I called Samuel Ortiz from my van. He answered on the second ring. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he said, You went to the library. Yes, good. Why did you tell me not to open the door? Because opening it makes you responsible. For what? The truth. I gripped the phone. What truth? He exhaled. My mother didn't die by accident. Evelyn didn't either. And Mayor Briggs has been stealing Briar Lane one house at a time for 15 years. I closed my eyes. Can you prove that? No, he said. But Evelyn could. I looked toward the house through the windshield. It sat at the end of the street, gray and wounded, waiting. What is behind the red door? I asked. I don't know all of it. That is not an answer. It is the only honest one. Then give me the honest part. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, Records, recordings, original inspection reports, things Evelyn copied before they erased them. She told me she had enough to stop the whole project. Then why didn't she? Because she was waiting for one more document. What document? The one proving Briggs ordered false condemnations before he bought the land. My mouth went dry. Did she get it? Samuel's voice dropped. I think so. She called me the night before she died and said, I have the red file. The next morning, she was dead. I sat in silence. The van heater clicked. A truck passed. My hands were cold. Samuel said, Tessa, listen to me. If you open that door, do not do it alone. Do not call the town police. Do not call anyone connected to the county. Find outside counsel. Document everything. And if Briggs comes to you smiling, understand that he is already deciding how afraid you need to be. Too late for that. He had already come. I told Samuel about the midnight visit. He cursed softly. Then he suspects. Suspects what? That you found it. How would he know? Because the house is watched. I looked at the dead-end street. Every window suddenly felt like an eye. I did not sleep in the house that night. I slept in my van outside a 24-hour diner in the next town. The next morning, I found a lawyer. Her name was Dana Whitcomb. Not from our county. Not friends with anyone in Briar Creek. A civil litigation attorney 40 miles away, with experience in municipal corruption cases. Her website said she represented whistleblowers. That word made my stomach twist. Whistleblower sounded brave. I did not feel brave. I felt tired, dirty, scared, and angry. But those things can sit inside the same body as bravery. Dana listened for 40 minutes without interrupting. Then she said, "Do not open that door until I am there with a videographer and a retired law enforcement witness." I blinked. A videographer? Yes, the first opening matters. We need an unbroken chain of custody from the moment that door opens. Do you believe me? Dana looked at the notes in front of her. I believe evidence, and your timeline smells like evidence. That was enough. 2 days later, Dana arrived at 19 Briar Lane with a retired state trooper named Ellis Moore, a licensed locksmith, and a videographer who looked like he filmed weddings, but said nothing when he saw the red door. Samuel came too. He stood in the basement with his hands in his coat pockets, staring at the door like it was a grave. Mrs. Keene waited upstairs. She said she did not want to see what Evelyn had died protecting. The locksmith worked for 12 minutes. No one spoke. When the lock finally turned, the sound was small. Too small for the way my life was changing. The red door opened inward. Cold air moved out, not damp, dry cedar. The room beyond was narrow and deep, built into an old coal storage chamber. Shelves lined the walls, metal boxes, crates, cassette tapes, VHS tapes, maps, rolled blueprints. And on the back wall, beneath a single hanging light bulb, was a red filing cabinet. Samuel whispered, "She got it." Dana raised one hand. No one touches anything until it's filmed. The videographer moved slowly around the room, every shelf, every label, every box. The labels were precise: inspections, Batcher acquisitions, council minutes, Orta's property, Mar correspondence, Briggs payments, police complaints, insurance fires. My breath caught on the last one. Insurance fires, Dana noticed. "What is it?" I pointed. She followed my hand, then looked at me. "Do you know something about that?" I did. I knew one thing. My father had been blamed for an insurance fire when I was 16. Not charged, not convicted, just blamed. A warehouse renovation he managed had burned down 2 days before a safety hearing. The owner claimed my father had cut corners. My father lost his license, lost work, lost friends, lost himself slowly over the next 10 years. He died with people still calling him careless. I walked toward the box before I realized I was moving. Dana stopped me gently. "Not yet," I stepped back, but my eyes stayed on the label, insurance fires. The first box we opened was the red file cabinet. Inside was one folder read. Of course, on the front, Evelyn had written, "Calvin Briggs, authorization chain." Inside were copies of emails, inspection orders, condemnation requests, Tenel memos. Bank transfers. One memo carried Calvin's signature. It authorized accelerated structural review for selected properties on Briar Lane before public acquisition notices had been issued. Dana read it once, then again. Her face changed. "This alone is bad," she said. Ellis Moore leaned over. "How bad?" "Career ending if confirmed." Then we opened the Ortiz property box. Samuel stood very still. Inside were photos of his mother's house before condemnation. Solid roof, clean basement, upgraded wiring. Then the official report: Severy structural collapse risk, uninhabitable, ordered vacated. Inspector signature. Warren Pike. My heart stopped. Pike, as in Pike and Alder Homes. My old boss, Martin Pike's father. I said the name out loud. Dana looked at me. "You know that inspector?" His son was my employer. That was the first time I understood the circle was wider than one mayor. The next hour felt unreal, every box connected to another. Briggs Development bought properties cheap after condemnation. The county inspector signed reports. Salient contractors estimated repair costs far above reality. Families sold under pressure. Vacant homes became blight. Blight became justification. Justification became redevelopment money. And beneath it all were people. Old people, poor people, widows, families with no lawyer, men like my father, blamed when buildings became inconvenient. When Dana opened the insurance firebox, I had to sit down on the basement stairs. Inside were copies of investigation notes from 16 years earlier, photos of the warehouse, a contractor log, an invoice for electrical work scheduled before the fire, and a handwritten note from Evelyn. The fire was used to remove Rowan from the project. He objected to false structural certifications. Briggs paid Pike to redirect blame Rowan, my father. I read the sentence until the words stopped looking like words. Samuel sat beside me. "I'm sorry," he said. I could not answer because for nearly 20 years, my family had carried that shame. My father had carried it into his grave. And the proof that he had been set up had been sitting behind a red door in a house I bought for $100. Not luck, not coincidence. Something closer to a reckoning. By evening, Dana had locked the room, sealed the door, and taken custody of copies only. The originals stayed in place under video record until she could file emergency motions. I drove to Lena's house that night. She opened the door in pajamas. Brian appeared behind her. "What happened?" Lena asked. I held up a folder. "I need you to listen without interrupting." Brian sighed. "Tessa, it's late." I looked at him. My father did not cause the Alden warehouse fire. His face changed. Lena's hand went to her mouth. "What?" "I found proof." We sat at her kitchen table until after midnight. I showed them copies. Not everything. Enough, the memo, the inspection notes, Evelyn's handwritten statement. Lena cried quietly. Brian did not speak for a long time. Then he said, "I owe you an apology." I looked at him. "Yes," I said. He looked down. "I'm sorry." It did not fix everything, but it mattered that he said it without defending himself. Lena reached for my hand. "I thought you were falling apart," she whispered. "I was," I said. "I just fell in the right direction." The next week moved fast and too slow at the same time. Dana filed an emergency preservation petition in state court, not county state. She named Briggs Development, the county inspection office, and several shell companies tied to the Briar Commons redevelopment. She also sent copies to the state attorney general's Public Integrity Division. That was when the pressure began. First came the polite call from Martin Pike, my old boss. "Tessa," he said warmly, "I heard you've gotten tangled in something complicated." His voice made me remember every late night he had taken credit for my work. I said nothing. "I want to help you avoid being used by lawyers who don't understand how small towns work." Still nothing. "You were always smart," he continued. "But sometimes smart people mistake paperwork for truth." I recorded every word. Then I said, "My attorney will contact you." His warmth disappeared. "Tessa, be careful. Everyone keeps saying that. Maybe you should listen." I hung up. Then came the envelope under my front door. No stamp. No return address. Inside was a photo of my van parked outside the diner. On the back, one sentence: "You sleep too much alone." I stared at it for 1 full minute. Then I called Dana, then Samuel, then the state investigator assigned to the case. His name was Grant Calder. He came that afternoon with 2 agents, not local police. State, they took the envelope, they checked the cameras. They stood in the basement and looked at the red door. Grant Calder was quiet, gray-haired, and very tired-looking, but when he read Evelyn's labels, his face sharpened. "How long has this been here?" he asked. "Years," Dana said. He looked at me. "And you bought the property at auction?" "For $100. His eyebrows rose slightly. "That may be the cheapest public corruption archive in state history." It was the first time anyone made me laugh in that house. I needed it. The laugh died quickly. But it reminded me I was still human. 3 days later, Mayor Briggs held a press conference. He stood in front of City Hall, wearing a blue tie and wounded dignity. He said certain individuals were spreading reckless accusations. He said redevelopment always attracted resistance. He said outsiders and opportunists were trying to derail progress. He did not say my name. He did not have to. Everyone knew. By sunset, my phone was full. Some messages called me brave. More called me greedy. One said I should take my $100 house and crawl back under it. Brian wanted me to shut off my phone. Lena wanted me to move in with her. Samuel told me to stay visible. Dana told me to stay quiet. Grant Calder told me to stop opening envelopes without gloves. Everyone had instructions, but nobody could tell me how to stop feeling my father's name burning through the paper in my mind. Ron objected. Briggs paid Pike Durdat blame. My father had objected. That was why they ruined him. Not because he failed, because he refused. The first public hearing was scheduled for the following Monday. The council said it was to address community concerns regarding Briar Commons. Dana told me not to expect justice there. "Expect theater," she said, "but theater can still reveal who forgot their lines." The chamber was packed. People stood against the walls. Cameras from 2 local stations lined the back. Mayor Briggs sat at the center table, calm, generous, almost paternal. Martin Pike sat 2 rows behind him. That surprised me. Then I realized it should not have. Men like that attend fires to make sure nothing useful survives. I sat in the front row beside Dana. Samuel sat behind me. Mrs. Keene sat on my other side with her purse in her lap and her mouth pressed into a thin line. Briggs began by thanking everyone for their concern. He said Briar Creek was a town of neighbors. He said change was hard. He said misinformation was painful, then he looked directly at me. Some people see an old house and imagine a conspiracy, he said. Others see a struggling town and try to build a future. A few people clapped, not many, then public comment began. A man from Briggs Development spoke first. He said delays cost jobs. A councilwoman said reputations were being damaged. Martin Pike stood and said he had known my family. That made my stomach turn. He said my father had been a good man but not a perfect one. He said, grief can children search for villains. I stood before Dana could stop me. The room shifted. I walked to the microphone. My hands were cold. My voice was not. My father died with your lie on his name, I said. Pike's expression hardened. Briggs leaned back. I bought 19 Briar Lane because everyone said it was worthless. I found records inside that house. Records kept by Evelyn Marr, a county employee who tried to report false condemnations before she died. The council chair interrupted. Miss Rowan, this is not a trial. No, I said. That is why I gave the evidence to the state. A murmur moved through the room. Briggs smiled. You found papers in a condemned house and decided they were evidence? I looked at him. I found your signature. The room went still. His smile stayed. But his eyes changed. Not fear, not yet. Calculation. Miss Rowan, he said gently, I understand this has emotional meaning for you. There it was. The oldest weapon call a woman emotional when you cannot answer her facts. Dana stood then. My client will make no further statements tonight. She touched my arm. I stepped back. The hearing ended with no resolution. Of course it did. But by the next morning, 3 more residents contacted Dana. An elderly man whose house had been condemned after he refused to sell, a widow who had signed under threat of fines, a former junior inspector who said he had been told to copy Pike's language into reports without visiting properties. The red door had opened something bigger than a room. It opened mouths. 2 weeks later, the state executed search warrants. City Hall, the inspection office, Briggs Development, Pike and Alder's archive storage. I watched footage on the evening news from Lena's couch. Boxes carried out, computers bagged, reporters shouting questions. Mayor Briggs walking past cameras with a face carved from stone. Brian stood behind me, holding a bowl of popcorn he forgot to eat. Lena cried again. This time, not from sadness. From relief the next day, my phone rang, unknown number. I answered because by then every unknown number could be either danger or proof. A woman spoke. Miss Rowan, my name is Diane Bell. My mother was Evelyn Marr's home nurse. I sat up. She told me to call if the house ever made the news. My pulse quickened. What did she tell you? That she made recordings? We found tapes. No, Diane said. Not those. The last one. The last one. My mouth went dry. Where is it? My mother kept it. She was scared after Evelyn died. She passed last year. I found it in her things. What is on it? A pause. Then Diane said, Evelyn talking to Calvin Briggs 3 days before she died. I called Dana. Dana called Grant Calder. Grant called Diane. By sunset, the tape was in state custody. I did not hear it until the second hearing, the big one. The one where Calvin Briggs finally stopped smiling. It took place in the same council chamber because the town demanded a public session before voting to suspend the Briar Commons development. That was the official reason. The unofficial reason was that everyone wanted to see who would bleed. Briggs arrived with an attorney. Martin Pike did not attend. That told me enough. The council table looked smaller that night. The room was overfull. Reporters stood shoulder to shoulder. Residents lined the walls. People who had called me greedy now looked at me with careful faces, as if kindness could be added retroactively. Dana sat beside me. Samuel sat behind me. Mrs. Keene held my hand. Grant Calder stood near the side door with a sealed evidence bag. Inside was the key. And the tape. The council chair began with formal language. Review. Concern. Temporary suspension. Independent inquiry. Words that tried to sound clean in a dirty room. Then Briggs spoke. He said he welcomed transparency. He said he had always acted in the town's best interest. He said redevelopment required difficult decisions. Then Grant Calder stepped forward. Before any vote, he said, the state requests that the council hear evidence relevant to the integrity of the Briar Commons approval process. Briggs' attorney objected. The council chair hesitated. The crowd murmured. Then Mrs. Keene stood. She was small, 73, bird sweater, steel spine. Let him play it, she said. One voice, then another, then the whole room. Let him play it, let him play it, let him play it. Briggs looked around, and for the first time, he saw the town was not his audience anymore. It was his jury. Grant placed the key on the table. Then the tape, the cassette player clicked. Steak filled the room. Then Evelyn Marr's voice, thin, old, angry. I know what you did to the Ortiz house. Then Calvin Briggs. You know part of it. Evelyn again. I know enough. Briggs laughed softly on the tape. You always thought papers could save people. They can. No, Evelyn. People with power save people. Papers only matter when someone powerful decides to read them. There was a rustling sound. Then Evelyn said, I have the red file. The room went completely still. Briggs' face had gone gray. On the tape, his voice dropped. You should not have said that. I made copies. Where? Somewhere you won't look until it's too late. A long pause. Then Briggs said the sentence that ended him. Then I suppose I need to make sure you don't tell anyone where. Someone in the chamber gasped. The tape crackled. A chair scraped. Evelyn's voice shook but did not break. If anything happens to me, Calvin, it will all come out. Briggs said, not if people think you fell. The tape ended. No one moved. Not the council, not the reporters, not the residents. Even the air seemed to hold itself still. Briggs' attorney whispered urgently into his ear. Briggs did not respond. He stared at the cassette player like it had betrayed him. But it had not betrayed him. It had remembered him. That was worse. Grant Calder spoke quietly. Mayor Briggs, state agents have a warrant for your arrest. The room erupted, not like applause, not like chaos. Like pressure finally breaking through a wall, Briggs stood, his chair tipped back, his wife began crying. A councilman covered his mouth. Samuel put his hand over his eyes. Mrs. Keene whispered, Evelyn. I looked at Briggs as they turned him around. He saw me then, really saw me, not as a broke woman with a ruined house, not as an inconvenience, not as a loose end, as the person who had opened the door he spent years burying, his face twisted. You have no idea what you've done, he said. I stood. Maybe I should not have. Maybe Dana would have told me to sit. But some moments are not for lawyers. Some moments belong to the dead. My father said no to you, I said. Evelyn said no to you. Samuel's mother said no to you. You just finally heard us. He looked like he wanted to answer, but Grant Calder guided him toward the door. This time, the whole town watched him leave. The fallout took months. Calvin Briggs was charged with public corruption, conspiracy, evidence tampering, intimidation, and later, after further investigation, manslaughter connected to Evelyn Marr's death. The manslaughter charge came from the tape, Diane Bell's statement, and medical evidence reviewed after exhumation. That word still chills me. Exhumation. Some truths are so buried the ground itself has to be asked to give them back. Martin Pike was charged with falsifying inspection documents and conspiracy. Pike and Alder homes collapsed within 6 weeks. I did not celebrate that part loudly. But I will not lie. When I saw the office sign being removed, I sat in my van across the street and let myself feel the full weight of it. For 10 years, that company had used my skill, while men like Martin stood on my shoulders. For 16 years, his family's lie had sat on my father's name. The sign came down slowly, one screw at a time. It felt fair. The Briar Commons project was suspended, then terminated. The county created a compensation fund for families affected by false condemnations. Samuel received payment for his mother's property, but he said money did not know how to apologize. He was right. Lena and I took our father's documents to the cemetery. Not all of them, just the one clearing his name. We stood beside his grave while the wind moved through the trees. Lena read the finding out loud. Her voice broke twice. Mine did not. Not because I was stronger, because I had been crying in private for months. When she finished, I placed a copy under a small stone at the base of his headstone. People know now, I said. That was all. Sometimes justice is not thunder. Sometimes it is one daughter standing in wet grass with a piece of paper her father deserved while he was alive. As for 19 Briar Lane, I kept it. People asked if I was going to sell. Developers asked too. Very politely, very carefully. I said no. I finished the renovation over the next year. The porch became solid. The kitchen became bright. The upstairs bathroom got green tile because Evelyn's old photo showed green tile, and I liked the idea of giving one thing back. The basement changed the most. I did not seal the red door again. I removed it from its frame and mounted it on the wall of the front room. Some people thought that was strange. Maybe it was. But I wanted to see it every day. Not as a warning. As a reminder, the room behind it became an archive space. Copies of every document Evelyn saved. Photos of the old Briar Lane families. Newspaper clippings correcting the record. My father's clearance. Samuel's mother's property file. A picture of Mrs. Keene, holding the red notebook I had filled from the beginning. We called it the Mar Room. On the first Saturday of every month, people come by, students, rewarders, old residents, young families who moved into the restored houses after the redevelopment plan died. I tell them the same thing. This house was not haunted, it was burdened. There is a difference. A haunted house traps the dead. A burdened house carries what the living refuse to face. Evelyn carried it until she could not. Then the house carried it. Then I found the door. People still ask why I opened it, after the warning, after the call, after the mayor came to my porch. After the photo of my van, they expect me to say courage. But courage sounds too clean. The truth is uglier and more useful. I opened it because I was tired of letting powerful people decide which doors stayed shut. I opened it because my father never got to defend himself. I opened it because Evelyn died with copies hidden in cedar and steel. I opened it because Samuel's mother lost her home. I opened it because a man smiled at me in the rain and thought $100 meant I was nobody. He was wrong. $100 bought me a deed. The deed gave me a door. The door gave me the truth. And the truth took down a mayor. I still get unknown calls sometimes. Most are reporters. Some are pranksters. Once in a while the phone rings late and there is silence on the other end. I do not shake anymore, not much. I just let the silence sit. Then I say, the door is already open. They always hang up. I think about Evelyn often. I think about her hands labeling boxes, her careful files, her decision to paint the door red. Red for danger, red for blood, red for stop, or maybe red for remember. I think about the stranger's first warning. Don't open the red door. Samuel told me later he said it because he was afraid. Not of the truth, of what the truth would cost me. He was not wrong. It cost me sleep, safety, illusions, the last comfortable pieces of my old life. But it gave me something too. A house, a name cleared, a town forced to look at itself, a future I built with my own hands. So if you ever find yourself standing in front of a door everyone tells you not to open, ask yourself one question. Who benefits from it staying closed? If the answer is someone who has lied to you, stolen from you, shamed you, or counted on your fear, then maybe the warning is not for you. Maybe it is for them. I bought an old house for $100. A stranger called and told me not to open the red door, but I opened it, and when I did, the people who buried the truth finally learned something. Doors do not stay closed forever. Not when the right person is desperate enough, stubborn enough, and underestimated enough to turn the key. What would you have done? Would you have walked away? Would you have called the police immediately? Would you have opened it alone? Or would you have done what I did and made sure the whole world saw what was waiting behind it? Tell me in the comments, because somewhere, someone is standing in front of their own red door right now, and they need to know this. Fear is not always telling you to run. Sometimes fear is pointing at the exact place where the truth is buried.